That boy has no idea what his name is anymore. The immigration clerk at Ellis Island looked at him, heard Vito Andolini from Corleone, and wrote down Corleone as his surname. And the boy just sat there, alone in a quarantine room with smallpox, staring through a small window at a statue he'd never seen before in a country whose language he didn't speak. He was 9 years old. 6 weeks before that moment, his father was alive. His mother and brother were alive. And in one tragic moment, he lost them all. A 9-year-old orphan found himself at the shore of New York with nothing but dark, twisted vengeance burning inside of him. This video is not about how Vito Corleone built a criminal empire. Every other breakdown will tell you that story. This one asks the question that actually matters. What does a boy have to decide about the world when the world kills his entire family before he turns 10? And what kind of man does that decision make him? Everything you're about to see is the answer. Antonio Andolini was not a powerful man. He was not connected. He was not wealthy. He was a villager who refused to pay tribute to the local mafia chieftain, Don Ciccio. That refusal was considered an insult. In Sicily at that time, an insult from a man without power was not complicated. Antonio was killed. His oldest son Paolo stood at the funeral and swore revenge. Ciccio's men killed him before the procession reached the cemetery. 2 sons gone in the same week, one for defiance, one for grief. Then Signora Andolini did something that takes a particular kind of courage. She walked to the man who ordered both deaths and begged him to spare her last child. She told Ciccio the boy was 9, dumb-witted, that he never spoke.
Ma Vito, avevi solo 9 anni ed è fisso. E poi avevo cuzzanica.
Io non mi scando di parole, sai.
Here is the detail that viewers don't stop to sit with. Don Ciccio was not being paranoid. He was right. He looked at that 9-year-old boy and saw exactly what he would become. He just couldn't stop it. At Ellis Island, when the immigration clerk misread his paperwork and registered him as Vito Corleone, Vito never complained. He kept it. He kept the name of the village that killed his father, his brother, and his mother. Not because he was careless, because he had already made a decision about what that name was going to mean. He had nothing, no family, no language, no one coming for him. What he had was the clearest possible memory of what helplessness felt like. And somewhere in that quarantine room, he decided he was never going to feel it again. But that decision alone doesn't build anything. First, he had to learn to watch. Vito found work at Abbondando's grocery store. Genco Abbondando's father took him in when he had nothing, no references, no connections, no English worth speaking. He gave him a job, a wage, and a reason to stay. Vito filed that away permanently. He was not the kind of person who made noise. He watched. He learned people's patterns before he said a word to them, who kept their promises, who inflated their problems to get more than they needed. Who was generous and who only appeared to be. He cataloged it all without anyone noticing he was doing it. That stillness was not shyness. It was a unique method of observation. When Don Fanucci, the local black-hand extortionist, forced Genco Abbondando's father to fire Vito and hand the job to his own nephew, Vito didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He looked Genco Sr. in the eye and told him he would never forget what the family had done for him. Then he walked out. He filed that too. Not long after, his neighbor Peter Clemenza tossed him a bag of stolen guns and asked him to hide them for a week, promising a cut of the profit. Most men in that position would either refuse out of caution or say yes out of greed. Vito had been watching Clemenza. He already knew what kind of man he was dealing with. He took the bag. That single decision started a partnership that would eventually run New York. He, Clemenza, and Salvatore Tessio began moving stolen goods through the neighborhood, selling dresses door to door. Vito was the quiet one in the group, the one who remembered every conversation, every preference, every complaint. While Clemenza talked and Tessio schemed, Vito listened. Every other young man in Little Italy responded to what happened to them. Vito watched what was coming before it arrived. Then Don Fanucci climbed into his car.
Oi, Pizzotto, gente mi dice che tu mi dici noi che stai tranquillo. E manco lo vestito mi avete mandato a casa. Potete bagnare per picchiare, come la mia. Con gli altri pizzotazzi non lo sapete. Rispetto.
Clemenza and Tessio heard that and started calculating how much to hand over. Vito didn't react to Fanucci's demand the way Clemenza and Tessio did. He started studying him. He already knew Fanucci walked the neighborhood without visible protection, no muscle beside him, no men trailing at a distance. For someone who presented himself as connected to the Sicilian mafia, that was a strange way to move. Then he remembered something. A few months earlier, neighborhood boys had knifed Fanucci over an extortion dispute. Fanucci killed one of them, but he let the other two live after their families paid him an indemnity. At the time, people read that as mercy. Vito read it differently. No genuine mafioso lets an assassin walk away regardless of payment. The money isn't the point, the message is. And no real member of any family ever threatens to involve the police. That's not how power operates when you actually have it. That's how it operates when you're bluffing. Fanucci wasn't connected. He was performing connection. He had built an entire reputation on immigrants who didn't know enough to test it. Vito's conclusion was precise. This man's life was not worth the $200 he was demanding. He told Clemenza and Tessio to leave it with him.
Vi garantisco che io si bighi so che ci rogno io.
He met with Fanucci and offered him $100, half of what was demanded. Fanucci accepted. That was the confirmation Vito needed. A man with real backing doesn't accept half. He either takes everything or he makes an example. Fanucci took the $100 and called it done. Now Vito knew exactly what he was dealing with, and Fanucci had no idea that he had just signed his death warrant. That scene right there is the complete portrait of Vito Corleone. He had just killed Fanucci, and there he was holding his baby as if nothing had happened. He was not someone who lived in violence or savored it. He picked it up when the situation required it and put it down the moment it was over. After Fanucci's death, the neighborhood shifted. People started coming to Vito with their problems, not because he frightened them, because they had watched him remove someone they all feared, quietly and cleanly, without police involvement, without collateral damage, without a single loose thread. He became the man you found when no one else could help you. He had respect now, a reputation, a neighborhood that looked to him. But a neighborhood is not a machine. Building the machine would require something that separated Vito Corleone from every other man who ever held power in that world. He didn't want people who obeyed him. He wanted people who were bound to him. There is a fundamental difference between buying loyalty and creating it, and Vito understood that difference better than anyone. Respect opened the door. What Vito built behind it was something else entirely. There was an elderly woman in the neighborhood named Signora Colombo. Her landlord, a man named Roberto, was moving to evict her without sufficient cause. Most people in her position had no options. She came to Vito. He didn't send anyone. He went himself. He found Roberto leaving a barbershop and spoke to him calmly. He didn't threaten. He offered an advance on increased rent and then said something that captured his entire method in a single sentence.
Obrigado, Ciccio. Eu amo scodo. E spiace la mia città in sto vicinato che sono io. Igi tu sanno dire come io saccio favore.
Roberto asked around. The woman kept her apartment. And that story moved through Little Italy like water through cracks, into every conversation, every kitchen, every back room. Vito understood something that took most powerful men a lifetime to miss. Fear makes people look for exits. Obligation makes them stay. Every favor he did created a bond that fear could never manufacture. He wasn't building a criminal operation. He was building a web of people who owed him something and genuinely didn't mind. He financed the education of bright young men in the neighborhood. Some became lawyers, some became assistant district attorneys, some became judges. He paid police officers on a regular schedule, whether he needed anything from them at the time or not. He was buying future access, not present service. The distinction mattered enormously. Luca Brasi came into the family the same way. Brasi was feared across the neighborhood, a street enforcer with a reputation for extreme violence. When he was arrested, Vito pulled strings to get him released. He didn't offer Brasi a job. He gave him his freedom. What came back was not an employee. It was a man who would have walked into fire for the Corleones without being asked twice.
Because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
His moral code had edges too. He refused to touch drugs or prostitution, not from sentiment, from calculation. He knew exactly which judges and politicians would look the other way on gambling and bootlegging, and he knew exactly where that tolerance ended. Narcotics was where it ended. Every boss who crossed that line eventually lost everything to it. Vito watched them fall one by one and kept his distance.
Never tell anybody outside the family what you're thinking again.
The machine he built protected itself. Witnesses didn't want to speak against a man who had helped their mothers keep their homes. Politicians didn't want to lose the quiet influence he provided. The whole structure held together not because people feared what would happen if they crossed him, but because crossing him meant losing something they genuinely valued. The moment the federal government banned prohibition, the bootlegging revenue that had funded the Corleone operation disappeared almost overnight. Vito was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and he responded the way he always responded to changing conditions. He adapted before anyone else saw the problem clearly. He sent emissaries to Salvatore Maranzano, the most powerful boss in New York, with a proposal, an equal partnership. The Corleones would bring their political contacts, their police infrastructure, their organizational reach. Both sides would benefit. It was a reasonable offer from a position of genuine strength. Maranzano said no. That was the moment his empire ended, though he wouldn't understand that for another 6 months. Vito didn't rage. He didn't escalate immediately. He simply noted that he would not be making the offer again. Then Vito did something that no one in the American underworld saw coming. He wrote Capone a letter.
I spend my life trying not to be careless. Women and children can be careless, but not men.
That line is the letter. The letter told Capone, "You now know how I handle enemies." It asked why a Neapolitan was inserting himself into a dispute between two Sicilians. It offered friendship clearly and without pretense. And it closed with a quiet warning that the climate in New York was unhealthy for Neapolitans, and that Capone would be wise never to visit. Capone stood down. That exchange traveled through the entire American underworld within weeks. Vito Corleone had just humiliated the most famous gangster in the country without firing a single shot in his direction. The message to everyone watching was unmistakable. There was no way Maranzano was going to survive the power Vito wielded at that point, and in no time, everything that had been Maranzano's was absorbed into the Corleone operation. And somewhere in that same period, Vito returned to Sicily for the first time since the donkey cart. He went to see Don Ciccio.
Ti pigliaste un nome di sto paese, ah?
E tuo padre, come si chiama?
Antonio Andolini.
È più forte, non si sento buono.
Il padre si chiama Antonio Andolini e questo è Pezzi.
The boy Ciccio couldn't kill had come back exactly as Ciccio always knew he would. Vito now controlled New York. The empire was complete. The family was protected. Every promise he made to himself in that quarantine room at Ellis Island had been kept. But here is the question worth sitting with. He built all of it for his family, to protect them, to put them beyond the reach of anyone who might take everything the way Don Ciccio had taken everything. So why, at the height of everything he had built, did the thing he wanted most for his children have nothing to do with any of it?
I worked my whole life. I don't apologize to take care of my family, and I refused to be a fool, dancing on the string held by all those big shots. But I thought that when it was your time, that you would be the one to hold the strings. Senator Corleone, Governor Corleone, something.
That is the only moment in the entire franchise where Vito tells you exactly what all of it was for. Not the power, not the respect, not New York. He wanted Michael out. Above it all, living a life that no Don Ciccio could ever touch. He got most of it right. He built something extraordinary. He protected his family in ways his father never could. But there was one decision still coming that would unravel the part that mattered most. And that decision set in motion the very thing Vito spent 50 years trying to prevent. That story is next.